let's start with that win total at 9.5, juiced to the over, minus 150 at BetMGM, and right around that number at most books, plus 125 on the under. I mentioned divisional placement at BetMGM. It is a little all over the place. Like plus 190 to win the division, plus 200 to finish second, but then plus 155 to finish third. So you see where maybe they're still viewed by some people, at least at some books, as being right behind the Bills and the Dolphins. Minus 145 to make the playoffs, though, as we continue to examine the AFC East in great detail this week. It's clear that a lot of people believe this is a three-team division as far as the playoffs go. I mentioned the schedule, fourth easiest. They open at San Francisco week 1, and then from there, okay, you're going to have to deal with Tennessee on the road, but then it's the Patriots and the Broncos, both at home. A trip overseas to England to play the Vikings before late in the year it does pick up. They're favored, though, by more than a field goal in 7 of 17 games already going in. So the volume has been turned up on the hype machine for the Jets this offseason, being as they expect to have a healthy Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, with this win total, 9.5. I mean, if it were any other roster with a 40-year-old quarterback coming off of an Achilles injury, I would say 1,000% take the under, right? Because that's not great right there. Like, Aaron Rodgers isn't getting any younger. He isn't getting any more mobile. Who knows if he's going to be able to stay healthy all season? But everything that the Jets have around Aaron Rodgers is top tier. I mean, they have a good receiving core, just brought in Mike Williams, too, to go with Garrett Wilson. Their defense, top 5 in the league. And their schedule is front-loaded really easily, other than that first opening game against the 49ers on Monday Night Football. But, I mean, last season, the league gave the rest advantage to the Jets. Like, the rest advantage they had all last season was one of the best in the league. This season, the NFL has just kind of given them an early schedule early on. That way they get to week 6 against the Bills and maybe they're 4-1, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's a success for the NFL, because people are going to want to watch Aaron Rodgers versus Josh Allen, both two teams that have been, extremely good to start the season. 5-1 going into week 6. That's a big time matchup on Monday Night Football, versus if the Jets were to start 1-4, 1-5 going into week 6.
Right.
That's not great for the league in terms of ratings for that Monday Night Football game with Buffalo. So I think the Jets go over this number of 9.5, despite Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers and old and coming off that injury. It just all kind of sets up too well for the Jets to have success this season.
You mentioned on the other side, they bring in Mike Williams to complement Garrett Wilson. I do think once you get beyond those two, and should we get the annual Mike Williams injury, which is a yearly occurrence, like, that's not a very deep receiver room. Like, I know Aaron Rodgers has a good relationship with Alan Lazard. Undoubtedly, that'll flesh itself out as the season progresses. But beyond Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams, and then, like I said, the security blanket of Alan Lazard, even if you include the tight ends, Tyler Conklin, their tight end number 1, there's not a ton of receiving weapons should something happen to Wilson or Williams.
I legitimately think Garrett Wilson could lead the league in receptions. And if Aaron Rodgers does stay healthy, when he has his go-to wide receiver, he falls in love with him. That's why Devontae Adams is in the news once again, talking about maybe a reunion with Aaron Rodgers. I just think he's going to get the targets. But, here's the thing about Rodgers, you guys. Like, 2 years ago, his last fully healthy season in Green Bay, that was statistically one of the worst seasons of his career. He couldn't connect on the deep ball with anybody other than Christian Watson the final 8 weeks of the season, but he was shaky all season long. So that's what does concern me. But Aaron Rodgers is at his best when he has that chip on his shoulder, right? Like, the Packers go out, they select Jordan Love, they move up to take him in the first round. The next year, Aaron Rodgers wins an MVP. The reason I'm really buying in, though, besides, I do like Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, is Aaron Rodgers motivated, healthy, hopefully ayahuasca or whatever, hopefully not in a cave, actually showing up to practice. But I like what they've done with the offensive line, you guys. You add Tyron Smith, who, again, he does have to stay healthy, but you bring him in free agency. You bring in Morgan Moses. You bring in John Simpson. And then you spend a first-round draft pick on a tackle. So I think the Jets finally got it right, hopefully, with the offensive line. Hopefully they'll be able to protect Aaron Rodgers. But what scares me a little bit, I feel like the Jets could win 11, 12 games with Aaron Rodgers as a game manager. I just don't know that he'll accept a game manager type role. Like when Mike McCarthy got fired in Green Bay, we heard Rodgers was changing plays at the line of scrimmage. And that's kind of what we saw that final year, even with Matt LaFleur, where he wasn't running the Matt LaFleur offense. He wanted to run the Aaron Rodgers offense. But I'm buying in, man. I think he's going to stay healthy. I think he's going to come out. He's going to be, on fire this season. I don't think he's going to win comeback player of the year. I don't think he's going to win an MVP because I don't think he's going to get the votes because not many people like Aaron Rodgers anymore. But I do think he stays healthy. And if he doesn't, guys, here's the best part about what the Jets did this offseason other than that offensive line. Tyrod Taylor is probably good enough to manage a game and win you 9-10 games. So if Rodgers does go down, if something happens, at least you have a reliable backup and not Zach Wilson and Mike White and Tim Boyle and everybody else they've rolled out on that field the last 3 years.
Breece Hall, 4.5 yards a carry last year, right? And he's a dual threat running back. He can catch the ball as well as run with it. But Kate and I looked at it earlier, and she brought up the point, 223 carries, I think it was last year. And really they had to lean on Breece Hall because of the quarterbacks that you mentioned, right? I'm curious to see, when I look at his player props, for instance, he's got the 4th highest rushing yardage prop in the league right now. He's listed at 1,000 yards. I'm okay with talking about Breece Hall as a dynamic running back who can, give you a little bit catching the ball out of the backfield and also run it for you, especially with the improvement at both tackle positions. I think that's an important point too. But is there reason to believe that Breece Hall's growth can be as exponential as it was from year 1 when he dealt with injuries to year 2?
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, I'm really high on him this season, right? Usually that first year back from an ACL or a knee injury, is kind of iffy. And then you see guys really bounce back, if they're going to bounce back and be the same player. Usually that second year, that third year. So, I mean, you said it, man. It's the improvement of the offensive line. Their offensive line combinations last year were disgusting. I think they saw the second most adjusted games lost due to injury. They used a league high 9 different offensive line combinations and at least 5% of their offensive snaps. I mean, they had 8 different players who saw 35 plus snaps at right guard and 5 who saw at least 59 snaps at right tackle. So I just think with an improved offensive line, a healthy offensive line, I think Breece Hall could have a monster year, not only running the football, but catching the football out of the backfield. What scares me a little bit is as an Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon fantasy owner for a couple years in Green Bay, the one thing that we do see Rodgers do a lot, especially when he's looking to pad the stats, when he's chasing an MVP, he'll check out a run plays in the red zone around the goal line. So I'd maybe stay away from rushing touchdowns with Breece Hall, but I do like the rushing yards and I like the season-long props. I think he's going to have a monster year, guys. I think, it won't shock me if we're talking about Breece Hall being the best back in the league next year. But, he's got to bounce back from that injury. And, I mean, remember last year even, he came back from that injury and he took, the first carry, 50-plus yards. And like you said, they had to rely on him a lot because they didn't have a quarterback. But I think the carries go down, but I think the production goes up, if that makes any sense.
Aaron Rodgers, comeback player of the year number. He's the favorite at plus 130. I could never bet that, obviously, at that number. I don't think many people are lining up to bet it. He's also tied for 6th on the board at BetMGM, Kate, at 10-1 to have the most passing touchdowns in the league, which, again, I think is – I'm not trying to be an Aaron Rodgers hater, but, that's crazy to me. That this dude at this age – with this assemblage of weapons, even if you love Garrett Wilson, is not leading the league in touchdown passes.
No, if you love Garrett Wilson, just take Garrett Wilson's receiving yards over or his touchdowns over. You don't have to go to Aaron Rodgers for that. So that's the play there. Lost my train of thought here, Chris. In terms of Aaron Rodgers, his yards this season, 3,800 and a hook. In his worst year or his final year in Green Bay, 36, almost 3,700 yards. I think you could go under, and it's heavily juiced to the under at minus 150. So the books are kind of telling you that Aaron Rodgers probably is not going to have another 4,000 passing yard season in his career. That would be a little bit surprising. So especially like, if we think the Jets defense is going to be as good as advertised, like this team probably isn't going to be in too many shootouts or playing from behind like
Right.
so much where Rodgers is throwing it deep. Like maybe they're down a field goal in the fourth quarter, something like that, where that's a manageable game versus like slinging it late in games. So I think you go under on a lot of the Rodgers props. Again, if you like any sort of touchdown angle for Rodgers, just target a single player. And I think that player would have to be Garrett Wilson with Mike Williams' injury history. Like I would take his unders because can he stay healthy? They play on turf too, which is like, prone to more injuries. So a lot of, despite which I don't know if this is totally like contradicting myself, if I like the over in win total, but I like the under on a lot of props. I guess I'm just leaning more so on this defense to play a major factor in the success of the team this year.
No, I can see that. That makes some sense to me, given how much this defense has been talked up and how much I think they're capable of. Hassan Reddick, who comes in this offseason, is lined at 10.5 sacks. That feels like a big number. I'm probably not going over there. I will go over on Garrett Wilson receiving yards, though. 1,100 is the number at BetMGM right now. And he had 1103 his rookie year. We talked about the quarterbacks he had to deal with last year. Finished 58 yards shy of 1,100. I do like Garrett Wilson. I put a long shot offensive player of the year bet in on him a couple months ago just for giggles because it's also kind of a hedge against the Jets actually being good this year. But I do think Garrett Wilson can have a quality season and the Jets still go 9-8. 30-1 for offensive player of the year, 7.5 touchdowns. He's only caught 7 between 2 seasons to this point. But again, if he's the guy, if Breece Hall took the exponential step forward last year, I could see Garrett Wilson taking an exponential step forward this year, even over top of what he's done in his first 2 seasons.